All right, welcome back. Again, we have an A2. It is our first A2 that we've ever done, and we have it due in just over 2 weeks. So we're going to check in today and make sure that we understand what we've looked at so far in the course and how it fits in. The A2 reads, although interconnectedness can lead to progress, it also exposes us to danger. In order to survive, societies must be built on key cornerstones. You may recall that in the past we highlighted the key terms in the source, the big rocks that we have to ensure that we address when we analyze the source. So the first body paragraph that you're going to have in your A2 is an analysis of the source. We have to analyze what has been said before we respond to it. So although interconnectedness, we pause there and we know that that word is a placeholder for globalization. So even though the quote, the source doesn't use the term globalization, we know that one of the themes being introduced to us is the theme of globalization, because that is interconnectedness. Although interconnectedness, globalization, can lead to progress. So when we pause on the word interconnectedness, we should have an opportunity to say that interconnectedness fits in many dimensions. Related to issue 1 of this course, we looked at economic globalization. So we could talk about the economic interconnections that we make. We could talk about social interconnections. We can talk about political interconnections. We can talk about the change that happens to us economically, politically, socially, and culturally as a result of globalization. So that first word, interconnectedness, is an opportunity for us to look back into related issue 1 and to show that we understand the consequences of globalization on us and on our identities. So although interconnectedness can lead to progress, so we pause there and we say to ourselves, before I can respond to the essay, I'm going to have to define what does it mean by progress. Economically, how do we quantify the word progress? Is that GDP? Is it per capita GDP? Is it per capita income? We're talking about gross national happiness or some other measure of progress. How do we quantify progress? And we might even introduce the added layer, this added nuance of complexity, saying that it's important to define who's defining progress. Because to someone that is a conservative or to someone who's more progressive or liberal, they might see progress differently. Someone that's more authoritarian or someone that's more libertarian, they're going to define social progress differently. So as we define these key words, we're also going to unpack the significance of who defines them. That depending upon who defines the word progress, you're going to get a different definition. Now, from the perspective of an authoritarian, progress might include submission to the state. It might include this awakening that I should wake up in the morning and work for the benefit of others. As Marx would say, from each according to his ability to each according to his need. Whereas progress from the perspective of an individualist, from a John Locke or an Adam Smith, might be more focused on the celebration, the growth of individual rights and freedoms. That progress would be more defined as self-interest rather than collective interest. So as we define these key words, we're also going to talk about the significance of who's defining them. Then looking at that first phrase, although interconnectedness can lead to progress, we might pause and say, looking at that phrase, we can see that it's celebrating globalization because it's associating progress with interconnectedness. So the first phrase celebrates it, but there's a qualifier there because it says although. So we know that they are acknowledging that there are people in our society that celebrate globalization. There's going to be a second part of this sentence. It also exposes us to danger. So although the source recognizes that there are some among us that would celebrate globalization because it leads to progress, it is also a warning. The source presents us a warning because it exposes us to danger. Just like the word progress, the word danger is vague. There is no further elaboration on what the danger might be. So in the analysis of source part of the essay, we have an opportunity to elaborate, to hypothesize, to speculate about what the danger might be referring to. When the source says danger, it's a reference to culturally, perhaps assimilation, economically, perhaps exploitation, subordination. Politically, the danger could be losing one's ability to shape their own nation in terms of sovereignty. That if we drift towards authoritarianism, the danger of interconnectedness and being exposed to authoritarianism might be the loss of autonomy, right? Political self-governance. So although interconnectedness can lead to progress, acknowledging that globalization should be celebrated, creates progress, there's also this warning there. It leads to danger. We also talked about how these sources often will show us a problem and a solution. Problem, danger. Solution, in order to survive, societies must be built on key cornerstones. So there's a path, a solution there, built on key cornerstones, and the goal, the term in a different color, is to survive. Not just progress, but we're going to go past that and we're going to survive. In order to survive, survival is the goal. We must be built on key cornerstones. So before we respond to the source, we need to identify the goal is to survive, and we need to elaborate on what that survival as a state might look like. Much like danger and progress, the source introduces a key term like key cornerstones, but doesn't elaborate on what cornerstones could be. So we have an opportunity there to also show off a little bit to demonstrate our knowledge on what cornerstones might be. And then the word must. The word must is even in italics to get our attention, that there's a tone there. There's a tone associated with the word must. Before you respond to the essay, we want to make sure that you identify the theme. The theme is globalization. You want to identify related issues like progress and danger and cornerstones. I want you to talk about the significance of the language, the division of society surrounding that language. Identify tone in words like can and must. Goals in like survival. And then ultimately, when you go through those steps, connecting it to globalization as you go, then you get ready to respond. So that's the analysis part. We need to be done the analysis at this point. If you're not done the analysis, please reach out for help. Sabre support, emailing, give me a rough draft, I can look it over. Then we looked at thesis statements. And we said in order to build a thesis statement, you're really responding to the claims that are embedded within the source. The source makes a few very specific claims. Claim number 1, interconnectedness can lead to progress. Well, not everybody would agree. Maybe interconnectedness can lead to progress. Maybe you're right. Maybe it does not lead to progress. Maybe you're absolutely wrong. Or maybe you're sometimes right. Maybe it doesn't always. Or maybe it does always lead to progress. So can lead to progress says maybe not all the time. Always says we always get progress. Does not says we never get progress. So the source is saying we sometimes get progress. And maybe you disagree and say, no, we always get progress. There's never a moment with globalization where there's regression, where there's destruction, where there's a loss of wealth, political, social, economic wealth. Interconnectedness exposes us to danger, is the second claim. That as you get ready to respond to it, you have to say, well, is there a danger connected to interconnectedness? And then finally, in order to survive, how do we survive? They make the claim societies must be built on cornerstones, key cornerstones. Maybe survival shouldn't even be the goal. And if it is the goal, how do we survive? So as we build our thesis statement, it's important to understand that your thesis statement needs to guide the body of your paper. That if your thesis statement makes 3 claims, then your body should be those 3 sections. Interconnectedness can lead to progress. That becomes paragraph 1. But it also exposes us to danger, paragraph 2. In order to survive, we need this, this, and this for cornerstones, paragraph 3. So in terms of the progress part, what have we done? We have looked at the Silk Road and we looked at the commodities and ideas exchanged along the Silk Road to see that interconnectedness in the ancient world did lead to progress. We looked at specific commodities like horses and paper and spices. Am I forgetting one? I always feel like I'm forgetting one. Those are three of the main ones. And then we also looked at ideas and religions. We looked at many religions that went up and down the Silk Road. We looked at ideas, including sciences and mathematics. And we looked at how they were transformative. Not just progress, but transformative. We looked at how paper would be transformative for a society. We looked at how horses would be transformative for a society. Spices would be transformative. So we have this body paragraph, our first body paragraph, where we're going to associate progress and globalization. And we can do much of that through the Silk Road, but we can also look at progress today. The idea that containerization has led to an increase in variety and diversity in our diet. That without containerization, Russ McBride wouldn't have the benefit of having, bananas for lunch, because bananas don't grow native to Alberta in such a cost-effective way. Bananas are, most of the year, the cheapest fruit here in Alberta, but they're not native to Alberta. How's that possible? Because of the wonders, the magic of globalization and containerization. So not only talk about the interconnectedness and progress in an ancient sense, you can talk about it in a contemporary sense. That links us back to related issue 1, as some of those dimensions were explored there. It also exposes us to danger. So what else have we been up to? We looked at the cornerstones of key civilizations. We looked at Rome and China and Athens and Sparta. We looked at Egypt, the Indus Valley. We looked at the Vikings. And we even looked at Hammurabi and the Babylonians. And we're going to come back to some of them again. So we're trying to collect lots of different case studies, evidence, and see how it fits into this idea that when we globalize, there's some danger there. So with the Roman story, we see that globalization, a connection to China, led to the devaluing of the Roman currency as they became addicted to silk. And the addiction to silk and the devaluing of their currency ended up presenting a challenge to their ability to fund their military, defend their borders, and it led to the barbarians being able to sack Rome and destroy the empire. That it led to their downfall. We also looked at the Romans and saw how their downfall was also a product of their military complex. This idea that they needed a strong military to expand their borders, to get booty from others, right? They're plundering their neighbors, but as they plundered their neighbors, they had to have more military. So eventually they couldn't continue to fund their foreign policy of expansion. They expanded beyond their capability. We looked at a very similar concept with the Spartans, that their cornerstone was their military. They didn't have enough agricultural industry or arable land in the native city-state of Sparta, so they had to expand to find food for their military. But as they did, they needed more and more military to keep control, to garrison those newly found lands. It brought them into conflict with other city-states that ultimately led to their demise. Looked at the cornerstone of ancient Egypt being their mythology. That meant that their leaders were their gods. But as they connected with others, new religions were brought to Egypt that challenged the religious Parthenon of Egypt and said that your leaders are not gods. So as we've been looking through this unit, we've been collecting these case studies, and we should be able to use these case studies not only to say these are the dangers of globalization, these are the dangers the Romans faced, the Athenians faced, the Spartans faced, these are the dangers that the Vikings faced or caused. Some of them were the cause of the danger. The last part of the essay is, in order to survive, these are the cornerstones needed. The difficulty with that point is Rome fell. Sparta fell. Athens, the city's there, but the city-state of Athens is different than the nation of Greece today. So the difficulty with the third part is it's not a simple question. So you might have to think more hypothetically. There's not one golden case study that says, hey, look at this civilization, it's been around for 8,000 years, they have the answer. We did look at China, though, and look at how China has tried to create a balance between tradition and change, and some may argue that China is the oldest civilization that is still clinging to its cornerstones of the past. So that's where we're at. We have this essay to provide us some kind of structure for this unit that we're looking at, and at the end of the unit, we'll test you on the unit by reading your essay. Any questions about where we've been? So I want you to leave here today knowing more about Athens. So we're going to reach back to that case study again. I want you to leave here today thinking more critically about what you believe to be the key cornerstones. We're also going to be making the transition today as we leave the ancient world and start seeing how we get to the historical world. Under what conditions did Europeans sail west to get east? How did we get to a new route of globalization that begins with Columbus and the age of exploration? So this has been a summary of where we've been, but also kind of shows us where we're headed. As we move forward together, we have to keep looking for how can we progress? What are the key cornerstones associated with survival?